Hello and welcome to the Light and Energy Show with me, Claire Wiles. We're here taking a break from the Olympics at the Barge Inn in Honey Street near Pewsey. Beautiful setting this afternoon in the sunshine by the Kennet and Avon Canal, and I've got the pleasure of the company of Andrew Collins. Welcome Andrew to the show.
Thank you very much.
Andrew is a writer and an investigator, and many of you will be very familiar with the many books that Andrew has written and will perhaps have heard him speak at on many occasions. Andrew, can you tell me a little bit about your investigations?
Well, I think that I've always had an interest in the mysteries of life, anything with a question mark after it, right from the age of sort of 10, I think, or possibly even younger than that. And I think it was only when I started going to senior school that I realised that not everybody, shared the same interest.
Yeah.
But it was a passion that I continued with. I became a UFO investigator at a young age, and it's a subject that I've been looking at now probably for about the last 35 years. And during that time, I've sort of brought together all of the different findings and research and ideas into various books, the latest of which is LightQuest, which you've got on your table here now.
Yeah.
And I mean, with this book I'm trying to paint a new picture of the UFO phenomena, because the modern flying saucer age began in 1947 with sightings and also the Roswell incident, and shortly after that mass sightings over Washington, the White House itself, and almost immediately there was an idea that this was some kind of nuts and bolts style space alien hardware coming from worlds afar, initially from the local planets, maybe Mars, Venus, Saturn, and then when it was realised that no life could obviously exist on those in the same form as ourselves, from much further places like Zeta Reticuli, or the Pleiades, or Orion, or Draco, or wherever. But to me, I think that this is underdoing the importance, the exotic nature, and the exciting nature of UFOs, because I think it is far more than this. I think we're dealing with a phenomena that is interactive with the human mind. I believe that it's multidimensional. It exists in part in a higher dimensional reality, and I believe that we're dealing with pure energy forms that have probably coexisted with humanity for thousands of years, if not more, and that there are intelligences behind these that could be as old as biological life, arguably are even older, and that it's this that we interact with, it's this that we see as aliens and as ETs and as spacemen, and that they are what we interact with, and that we need to start looking at this on a slightly different level.
So you begin your book with this sort of archetypal UFO story of Roswell and your findings that were in a museum at Roswell of something that isn't so well known, a particular front cover of a newspaper. And can you tell us a little bit about your findings and what set you off with that?
I think I always had my doubts about Roswell, the actual crash itself. But I still sort of held a flame for it, and a few years ago I actually got the privilege to get to Roswell, and I sort of saw it as a little bit of a mecca in a way, to go there, particularly after seeing the TV series Roswell about these sort of all-American teenagers who were actually aliens, and the whole idea of them coming to terms with this. But when I actually got there, the place was basically almost like a mess. I hated it. It was just, I just thought that if this is what 65 years of ufology has come to, really tacky shops,
all with aliens,
all with stupid aliens trying to promote and sell everything from antiques to fashions. It was just hideous in a way. But more than this, it took me just half an hour to find evidence that the UFO crash almost certainly never existed, with newspaper cuttings from the period that are never shown in books. And what it showed is that the farmer behind it, Mac Brazil, you know, after having reported the debris that he'd found, wished that he'd never brought this to public attention because of all of the trouble that it brought him. And the way that he described the debris was quite clearly some kind of terrestrial device, probably some kind of high altitude balloon, which was made of rubber and wood, and he actually said there was actually no metal with it. And this was so contrary to the views that you get in the books of some kind of crash site that's sealed off, you know, with military personnel and vehicles. That never happened. There were two guys that went out to the crash site, and you know, they collected up the debris and just piled it in the back of a small little truck and went off with it. Yeah. And this was then air freighted out from the Roswell airfield to Wright-Patterson base in Ohio, and you know, it was all the furore that surrounded it was something which was essentially the creation and the birth of a conspiracy theory that we still have today, and was probably one of the earliest conspiracy theories that exist.
So that kind of picture of that archetypal flying saucer, that was then imprinted in our mind, the grey alien.
It was
on the operating table. That's what we all like to have our visions
of. And the thing is that I felt shortchanged as far as ufology is concerned, because in the 1970s I was a believer in nuts and bolts aliens. You know, as an investigator, I was trying to find evidence of this, which is now I would see was probably quite biased, and I realised quite quickly that there was something wrong with this idea that the phenomena seemed to interact with the human mind. There seemed to be a connection. It was psychic, if you like. And I thought, well, hold on. If these are, you know, space vehicles, almost like the sort of extraterrestrial version of the Boeing 747 or Concorde or something, how is it that these seem to have some kind of psychic link with the human mind? Also, that certain types of people seem to be more prone to seeing this phenomena than others, and they were people that often had psychic experiences, paranormal experiences. They'd seen ghosts. That they had the ability maybe to touch stuff and feel information about its history, you know, psychometry. They'd had astral projection experiences. I thought, you know, why is it that these people seem to be more prone to the UFO encounter than others? And on that level I got closer and closer to the witnesses, eventually investigating the first ever UFO abduction car stop experience in the country. Now, this occurred in 1974. A whole family of 5 driving along a road in West Essex, when they encounter first an oval blue light in the sky, and then as they round a bend, the car headlights die, the engine dies, and they plunge into a luminous bank of green mist, and it all goes a bit fuzzy. They remember feeling nauseous. And they remember the hair standing up on their arms, necks, which is an electrostatic effect. And then the next thing they know, they're 3/4 of a mile further on from this site. They get home from this quite short journey and realise that 3 hours are missing from their lives. They have strange dreams after this about being in this lighted room, being examined by these tall, you know, sort of entities, and also these very ugly smaller entities. And then finally in 1977, 3 years later, they come forward, I interview them, hypnosis is used, and a on-board experience results from this. In other words, they'd been abducted by a UFO. But I realised that there was something not quite right with this as well, because right from the word go, it appeared that when they lost the time, it was almost lost instantaneously.
Yeah.
Because the children who were in the car were in exactly the same positions when they came out of the green mist, 3/4 of a mile further on down the road, as they were when they went in. Now, unless the aliens obligingly put them all back in exactly the same place, with 2 of the children asleep, huddled up, the third one standing up behind the front and passenger seat with his arms clasped around it, then something was wrong. It was almost as if they jumped time.
Yes.
They hadn't spent it somewhere else and were nicely placed back. They jumped out of space-time and were put back down. It's almost as if they existed somewhere else for that missing time.
Yeah.
And so I started to evolve the idea that they existed in what I call a bubble universe, an environment where some part of them or all of them actually was, but not in a physical sense, but in some kind of alternative reality, and that their minds interacting with some kind of clear intelligence was creating an environment which was acceptable for communication purposes.
Yeah.
And this led me to believe that the intelligences behind them might be pure energy forms that appear to us in almost whatever way we want to see them. And I actually believe this because as the decades have rolled on, the way that people relate to abduction experiences and the vehicles that they are supposed to actually be inside the entities, they seem to be evolving with our current technology. They always seem to be one step beyond our own technology. But if you look at some of the contactee abduction experiences from the 50s and 60s, the description of the vehicles that they entered are now crude, with sort of pulley levers and screens which are so outdated that it's almost silly. Now, if people are abducted, there's much more ergonomic screens and touch stuff and whatever. So how is it that these aliens, which could be thousands if not millions of years advanced of us, are developing so much in similar with human technology?
It
doesn't make sense to me.
No.
And to me, that I started to realise that UFOs and aliens and the idea of the contact is something far more complex, far more interesting than what I think that in many ways we've been led to believe by books, by films, by the media, by conferences, you know, which I was brought up with, and I felt shortchanged when I was in Roswell, and it was after being there that I decided to write this book, LightQuest. And also, I'd also been, just before arriving at Roswell, at a place called Marfa in Texas.
Right, with the lights.
Now, yes, Marfa is a place that for the last 200 years has seen the manifestation of strange lights. You know, pretty colours and appearances. They would appear, they would come together, and it was a phenomena. It's something which local people accept. Visitors come from all parts of America and obviously other parts of the world to view, and that's it. It's a mystery. It's not seen in the same light as the nuts and bolts spacecraft are of Roswell and the whole culture surrounding that. And it was a very refreshing way of looking at it. And you know, here you had a phenomena which was being investigated from a scientific point of view. People were watching it. There's even viewing platform where people can actually stand and watch these things, and that was much more refreshing because, you know, the interaction there is like starting over again and trying to understand what these UFOs are. Because despite what the books claim, you'll find that a lot of the early UFO cases were either balls of light, ovals of light, you know, cigar-shaped lights, or clusters of lights forming a form and giving the appearance of some kind of construct.
And this has been mentioned throughout history, hasn't it? And talking about the fairy realm in medieval times, and that fear of going near to the places that were full of light and the light balls.
Well, I mean, the evidence seems to suggest that the closer we get to this phenomena, the more weirdness occurs.
Yes.
The more it affects our brain, the more we have hallucinations, the more that reality seems to warp quite real around us. You know, you enter into almost like a zone which UFO writer Jenny Randall's referred to as the Oz factor, that everything seems to go very strange. You know, cars suddenly stop, you know, appearing on the road. In other words, now you're on your own. You know, even down to cows can start nodding, you know, in unison in the local, in a field, you know, or strange cloud effects, and all sorts of odd things occur as you interact with this phenomena. It's almost like reality is warping in some way. And then if you get even closer to the phenomena, it's like at some point you lose the connection with reality completely. And I think at that point you shift from this space-time into, you know, this bubble universe and enter an environment which very much, I would say, if you wanted to compare it, was like the holodeck on Star Trek or something. But it's not just something that's created by some kind of intelligence and left there. It's interactive. On a quantum level, you talk in terms of something called entanglement. That's how, you know, the particles in our head, you know, systems of particles are exactly the same as particles in another head or another state of being, and that the two are interrelated, interconnected, and therefore by virtue of that there's instantaneous contact, instantaneous transfer of information back and forth. And I think that that allows the building, the construction of this environment, which in many ways is like a dream. When you're in a dream, you suddenly become aware here and there that things are changing. You know, you think, oh, they weren't sitting there, you know, when I last looked round, or hold on, I thought that was somebody, and it's not, it's somebody else. You know, and it's quite clear that in dream states, the environment in which you're in, you have a basic setting, a basic dreamscape, but the rest of it is being made up as you go along. And in a way, that's exactly the same as what happens, I think, within a bubble universe environment. That, you know, you can see it as a UFO, the interior of a flying saucer, the interior of an alien spacecraft. But it's being made up as you go along, and it's an interaction, an interface between you and these genuine intelligences. And what are these intelligences? There's something universal, there's something that exists, I think, on a higher dimensional reality, and that manifests provisionally and initially through something that is referred to as plasma by the scientists. This is the full state of matter. First state of matter, for a little science lesson here, is physical solid stuff. Second state of matter is liquid, anything that flows like this. Third state of matter is the air around us and gas. The full state of matter is when that basically ionizes, essentially bursts into life and becomes something called plasma, which in essence is essentially seas of ions that are so excited that they emit photons of light. Light is obviously what comes down and lights up, and without which nothing would basically exist or be seen. And these seas are held together within dense magnetic fields that are produced by the electrons, and these illuminate and form these plasmas or plasmoids, and you know, with this plasma is found in everything from television screens to lightning. The sun is made of plasma, stars are plasma, neutron stars, black holes feed off plasma. Plasma is everything. In fact, to be honest, 90 to 95% of the universe is plasma, not physical stuff like we have here down on Earth. So to suggest that plasma might not be an environment into which life can exist, can manifest, would actually be quite a stupid thing to say, because in many ways this should be the most obvious place that we should look for life, because 95% of the universe is actually made of the stuff. So, you know, so I think that when people say that when they see lights, they see UFOs, they see these constructs, these energy forms, and there seems to be an interaction between them and the phenomena seen, then you know, and that interaction seems to be sentient or intelligent or conscious, it's because there is a there is an intelligence involved with these UFOs, with these lights. They are the intelligence.
And it's interesting, in the book you talk a lot about the geology of the landscape, fault lines, and the fact that people have seen these balls of light where there are obvious fault, or not necessarily obvious, but where there are fault lines on ancient sites. And I was at a dowsing meeting back in the earlier part of the year, and they were talking about fault lines running under things like long barrows, and of course people will see these balls of light above long barrows. So Mother Earth being a living, breathing plasma being, perhaps, it makes good sense, doesn't it, that these changes in the geology and in the Earth itself are going to create the right environment for the lights to be seen.
Absolutely. I mean, the book I've done into different sections, which all feature around different UFO hotspots in the USA and the UK. And the reason for this is because what I want to show is that in each of these areas, which include places like Avebury, Alton Barnes, Warminster, the old UFO Mecca, not far away in another part of Wiltshire, places like Marfa in Texas, and many others as well, is that yes, you see balls of light there, but a UFO believer might say, well, hold on, what's that got to do with an abduction experience? What's that got to do with real UFOs? Well, I can show that these same areas also produce close encounters. They also produce missing time experiences and abductions. In other words, the close encounters and abductions also cluster around exactly the same places where these balls of light are seen on a regular basis. Plus I can show that these same areas have been producing these lights and these constructs, these energy constructs, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And a good example is Rendlesham. I have a whole section on Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, the scene of arguably one of the most famous UFO cases in the world in 1980. These airmen, guarding an air base, see these strange lights. They go out to it and encounter this incredible light construct, within the woods. They have electrostatic effects, hair stands on end, reality seems to be warping in front of them. The object seems to be moulding to do with their thoughts, everything. And what a lot of people would say, oh yes, well this is just an extraterrestrial vehicle interested in, the nuclear weapons on the base. Yeah, but hold on, stuff like this has been seen there for hundreds of years. I can show that strange lights were seen in Rendlesham Forest in Victorian times. And also they were seen during the 50s and 60s. But more than this is that, very likely, is that they were seen during Saxon times, probably around 1300 years ago, because there is a famous Anglo-Saxon story called Beowulf. And this is a hero, a Saxon hero, and he comes up against a monster called Grendel. Now Grendel, one form of the name is Rendel, and this is the same name as Rendlesham, and Beowulf was actually written at Rendlesham itself, and Grendel is this monster that appears within the woods and within the local downs and whatever at night, showing these huge baleful eyes, like huge great saucer like lights. That's the way he appeared. Now you can imagine, if people in Saxon times were seeing these strange lights then, they could easily have thought, oh my God, it's a monster. Oh, it's we've heard these stories about Grendel. Maybe it's Grendel. So in other words, what we interpret now as space hardware in the past was seen as supernatural creatures and monsters. And of course, in the past, these same lights were seen as the lanterns of fairies. Or as the light of the devil or something like this. Plus, when people got too close to the lights then, they would find themselves suddenly transferred into fairyland, and they'd be dancing and singing with the fairies. Or if they were devout Christians, the light they would see, I give accounts of this in the book, suddenly Jesus is standing in front of them and they're transported immediately to paradise. In other words, these experiences are being fed by what we can accept under such circumstances. And if we want them now to be these horrendous you know, abduction experiences where people are virtually tortured by these hideous aliens and whatever, then that's fine. That's exactly what you're going to get with the UFO abduction. That's what's going to happen when you get too close to a UFO. But if we accept that this phenomena is an intelligence in its own right that may well have been coexisting with humanity for millions of years, and basically it wants some kind of interaction with us, some kind of contact. For what reason, I really don't know. Maybe it's something to do with evolution on both both parts, on ours and theirs. But that what we feed into the experience, we get out. In other words, we can make this a much more pleasurable teaching exercise, or educational exercise, which I believe, you know, is something that we need to look at. You know, if we want, you know, the alien agendas, if we want lizard-headed aliens to take over the planet, that's the sort of evidence you're going to find. If we want to start to understand these intelligences far more on a one-to-one, we need to start thinking differently about this phenomena.
And we can choose how we think. We can either choose to go along with what we've always been fed with UFOs, or we can choose to think very differently, can't we?
Exactly.
One of the stories you mention in your book, which is really interesting, is the Allagash Four.
Yeah, quite an incredible story,
Yeah.
this. I mean, Allagash is in Maine, that's in New England, and this group of four, you know, young men went on a fishing trip, and you know, it was a very remote region. They'd been out there several days. They'd already seen a ball of light, you know, over the sort of the forest areas that they were in. They were on a lake. And then a few days later, they saw a similar ball of light, not exactly the same spot, and it got closer and closer, and it was like a very large plasma ball of light, and they actually even describe it as plasmatic in appearance, with all sorts of colours, they said, which looked like magnetic fields within it. So, you know, we're not talking here about something made of nuts and bolts. You know, there's clearly some kind of energy ball or energy form, and what happened was that this object came over the lake, and at which point obviously they started to panic as it got closer and closer, and realised that they might be in trouble, and the object then dropped a beam down into the water, and this beam then sort of came over the boat, and then the whole thing goes wobbly. There's confusion, and nobody's exactly sure what happens next, and the next thing they know, they're back on the shore. The huge bonfire that they'd built as a beacon, so they knew whereabouts it was because it was pitch black, was now out, and they reckoned they'd lost 3 hours from their lives. Now, eventually they were introduced to a UFO investigator, veteran researcher by the name of Ray Fowler, and he suggested hypnosis, and all four of the guys underwent hypnosis, and they revealed this incredible on-board experience with these hideous looking aliens, of which this is the actual image of one of them, and you know that they're sort of almost insectoid headed creatures, and I mean, and what they actually underwent, certainly under hypnosis, or what they've said, was very, very traumatic from a medical examination and other stuff. You know, not something you'd wish on your enemies, to be honest. But what's the reality of this? Well, the interesting fact is that they never saw a nuts and bolts spacecraft. All of this happened as a result of a interaction with a plasma ball of light, a big one, and one that became obviously very close. And one that interacted them in such a way that I think that they were just completely removed from normal space-time and entered into this bubble universe realm and experienced this abduction, which was an interrelationship between the four guys, the intelligence, and almost like some kind of collective thing of almost what the phenomena created, this environment in which, you know, it could examine them, study them, communicate with them. So the actual experience was very, very real. However, I think that, you know, you're not dealing with, you know, actual creatures that look like this in reality. In other words, you can't go up and pinch them. You know, they are pure energy intelligences that exist, and that for some strange reason they've chosen this form to appear to us. And that's something to do with us, I think. I think that says more about us and what we expect to happen under these circumstances than what the phenomenon, because clearly these entities have a similarity to the elves, the fairies, the goblins of old. And, you know, in the past I've actually compared pictures of, you know, of elves and fairies against modern day greys and other types of aliens, and put them side by side and said, look, it's the same. You know, merely these guys today that are being seen in spacesuits, and that's the only real difference. On their ears are slightly less pointy. That's all. That's the only difference.
And you mentioned in the book about place names, that if you actually look at the place names, you can tell a lot about what went on there.
I mean, you know, somewhere that these lights, these constructs are seen repeatedly, you'll find that they have certain place names that recur again and again that suggest some kind of supernatural association, some kind of creature, an elf, a fairy, goblins. Hob is a famous one that comes up. A hob is an old name for the devil or a goblin. But Puck is another one. Puck is from an original Celtic word, which is also universally found in various parts of Europe, and basically means like a supernatural creature, a goblin. So if you are looking for places where you yourself can see and maybe want to interact with this phenomena, look on the maps for place names, you know, like Hob or Devils or, you know, or Park or something like this. This would be a good place to start, and then research it, because there might be other reasons why this name crops up. You know, maybe an interesting feature in the landscape, a rock or something like that. But often you will find that there are stories that say that this place was supposedly haunted by some kind of supernatural creature, and the reason why is that usually people will have been seeing some kind of strange, like mysterious light, and this means that this site, this place, has been known for this type of material for a very long time, and the chances are that you'll still be able to see phenomena like that again. You know, there's a place very close to here, at the barge in Honey Street, which is, I think, is Puck Shipton, which clearly has this Pucker name associated with it. Is this maybe because strange lights appeared here in the past? I think that is a possibility. You know, and people might be saying, well, you know, okay, well, look, I'm listening to what you got to say, but what about the real UFOs? You know, what about the real nuts and bolts spacecraft? Well, all I can say is that I'm not saying there are no aliens or ETs out there somewhere. Of course there are, but what I am saying is that the evidence that we've had from UFOs, mystery lights, and alien contact is actually not good evidence of extraterrestrial contact, I believe, in my own mind. What I do believe is that it's good evidence of contact with some kind of intelligence, and that intelligence is not simply earthly. I think that it's universal. I think that it can exist here, but in a blink of an eye it's the other end of the universe. So in a way it can be seen as extraterrestrial in the sense that it's not purely of the earth. But I think that to suggest that it's coming here from A to B on a spacecraft made of nuts and bolts, and it comes here and lands, is actually you know, doing an injustice, I think, to the phenomena itself.
It's all about that connection with all that is, isn't it? That's talked about spiritually quite often. And actually we are part of all that is, and maybe we're just needing to tap into that.
Well, tapping into it, I think, is a really good word, because, you know, I would advocate people trying to communicate with these intelligences.
It's great, actually, in the back of the book that you do give some creative visualization advice on how for people to do that.
Absolutely. You know, you know, because there has been a bit of a stigma about the idea of sky watching, or obviously in this area, circle watching. In other words, trying to see a crop circle, crop formation appear. You know, it's seen as very geeky in some respects. I mean, by the general public. It's almost seen that, well, if you weren't doing that, you'd probably be collecting train numbers or something like that. But it shouldn't be. You know, here we have an intelligence that exists, you know, one which I think does actually want to connect with us, and does with certain individuals here and there, you know, within these close encounters, the missing time, the abduction experience. You know, it does choose certain people to have this total contact with, this total interaction with, this communion with, as Whitley Strieber, a very famous abductee, described it, which is a perfect way, this two-way communion that takes place. And, you know, I would encourage it. I mean, I'm not necessarily, you know, saying that, you know, you should try and get yourself abducted, because that may not be a pleasurable experience, not at the moment. But I think trying to witness for this phenomena, trying to communicate with it, trying to bring it into manifestation is a great thing, and it will help us understand our relationship with the phenomena better.
Well, I think what you've produced here is, you know, it's such an outstanding and such an interesting user-friendly guide in this book, because you've got the science behind it, you've got the real-life stories, but also the maps of how to go and find the places that you might experience this phenomena, and then when you get there, what to do. And that is just absolutely brilliant. So people can use this book to actually go out and see what they can find out for themselves, because it's all about you forming your own opinion, and this is a guide on how to go out there and research it and do it yourself. So it's brilliant. I really recommend this book for people to read. But I can't let you go without actually asking you a little bit about what's coming in the future. Your next investigations, perhaps.
Well, I'm doing a book at the moment called Finding Eden, which is all about one of the most incredible archaeological enigmas at this moment, which is Göbekli Tepe. It's a 12,000-year-old stone temple complex in southeast Turkey. It's the earliest stone circles anywhere in the world, and they have beautiful carvings on the stones of animals and creatures and other abstract things, constructed at the end of the last ice age by a completely unknown culture, but in an area that also produced the Neolithic Revolution. In other words, the very foundations of settled society, moving away from the whole idea of the hunter-gatherers, you know, just doing their own thing, nomadic existence. This is where people settled down for the very first time. And the book investigates Göbekli Tepe. I've already been out there. I'm going back out there very shortly. But what's also important is that this same area is the place of the Garden of Eden in biblical tradition. Eden itself was a kingdom, and this is known to be somewhere in maybe eastern Turkey, and what I do is to show that the impact of Göbekli Tepe comes forward and creates the whole biblical idea of the fall of man, the Garden of Eden, the idea that this is also the place of the angels and of the watchers of the Book of Enoch, the so-called Nephilim, who are the ones that apparently gave us the rudiments of civilization and the whole relationship between the whole thing. And I'll be pinning down, hopefully, the exact location of the Garden of Eden within it, something which I've looked at in previous books, but this time I'm pinning down, you know, almost to an exact location. And I would say that without Göbekli Tepe, we would not have the story of Genesis, and the story of Adam and Eve, the story of the generations of the patriarchs. You know, all of this relates very strongly to that, and a cataclysm that occurred just prior to the foundation of Göbekli Tepe, a huge comet impact that was universal, that I think was one of the reasons behind the construction of Göbekli Tepe.
Amazing. Well, we can't wait for that. My goodness me. Do you ever stop and rest? This is continuing.
Well, I stop and rest and then get up and start again.
It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights in LightQuest, which, as I say, is an absolutely amazing book. I just wanted to add, actually, do you think that these whatever you call it, these plasma intelligences, have they got a message for mankind for now? Do you think this is a key time here, where we are now, that they're bringing forward, or that we're learning to perhaps look at this much bigger picture?
I think what they're trying to do is evolve us as a species, and I think that they're trying to do it on a very subtle level. And I mean, a lot of people involved with crop circles and UFOs are aware that there is some kind of raising of consciousness coming, and I'm sure the whole thing is related, and I'm sure that, you know, we're at a foundation point of something that is going to build into the future. That's why it's so important that we see this phenomena in a different way now. You know, we've got to get rid of those nuts and bolts.
We've got to get rid of the fear element, haven't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah, lovely.
We've got to start almost again. Again.
Well, it's been, as I say, absolutely fascinating talking to you, and we give our thanks to the Barge Inn here for letting us use their lovely beer garden. So Andrew's website, if you'd like more information, is www.andrewcollins.com, and people can purchase the books. How, Andrew?
Yeah, LightQuest's usual places: Amazon, good bookshops, or from andrewcollins.com.
Thank you. And of course you can find us on Facebook and on www.thelightsandenergychannel.tv. You can also sign up to our newsletter on our website. So thanks very much for joining me this afternoon in Light and Energy from me, Claire Wiles. Goodbye.